right, so you ready for this?
Yeah, hit me.
We're diving deep into something super interesting today.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
How to think for yourself.
Always a good one.
Right, and get this, it's not just about disagreeing with everyone just to disagree.
Oh, I know that type.
It's more about being comfortable with ideas that are both correct, like factually correct,
Right.
but also new, like no one's ever thought of them before.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot right there.
And we're going to explore why that kind of thinking is so crucial in certain fields,
Oh, like which ones?
science or investing.
Okay, makes sense.
But it can actually backfire in others.
That's interesting. I'm already intrigued.
Well, the research we're looking at today highlights this fascinating paradox.
Okay, lay it on me.
In some fields, you need novel ideas to really succeed,
Right.
whereas in others, simply being right is enough. So it's really about figuring out where your strengths and personality fit best.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Like if everyone already thought an idea was good, someone would have already done it right.
Totally. The article uses some really good examples to illustrate this point.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine you're going back in time,
Okay.
and you hear some guy pitching software for those like clunky little computers.
Yeah, I remember those.
Only hobbyists use them, right?
Yeah.
Like, does that sound familiar?
Kinda, yeah.
That was Apple.
Oh, no.
Or how about a website where you can rent airbeds on strangers' floors? Most people would think that was a crazy idea, right?
Yeah, back then, for sure.
Well, that crazy idea turned into Airbnb.
Wow. Those must have sounded like terrible ideas to most people back then.
Yeah, they probably did.
So to make those ideas work, you'd have to have a pretty strong sense of, I don't know.
Independent-mindedness.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, and that's a great segue into our next point.
Let's hear it.
Independent-mindedness versus conventional-mindedness.
Okay, two big words.
Right. It's not about intelligence, though.
Okay, so I can be smart and still be conventional.
Totally. It's really just about how comfortable you are with existing systems and ways of thinking.
Gotcha.
So conventional-minded people, they do great in roles where the key is following established procedures.
Okay, so like, whoa, what kind of jobs?
Like the administrators or managers, like those are just two.
Okay, yeah.
They bring like precision and consistency to those roles, which is important. But then you have these independent thinkers. They're the ones who can see opportunities that everyone else misses.
The ones who think outside the box.
Exactly. And they're willing to take risks, which is key.
Okay, but how do I know if I'm an independent thinker?
Hmm.
Like, can I take a test or something?
That's a great question. You know, a lot of people, they misjudge their own thinking style all the time. Conventional thinkers might have strong opinions on things, and they might mistake those strong opinions for independent thought. But it's really more about actively seeking out ideas that challenge what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, it's easy to just go along with the crowd.
And on the flip side, independent thinkers, they might worry that they're not independent enough.
Oh, so everyone's second-guessing themselves.
It's kind of funny when you think about it. It's not like they give you a test for this in school or anything.
That's true. Like, they don't really measure independent-mindedness like they measure intelligence.
And schools, they kind of reward you for giving the right answer. Like, that's how you get good grades.
Right, not necessarily for coming up with something new or different.
Exactly. And the article brought up a kind of ironic point that kind of relates to that.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It suggested that nerds, the kids who aced all those tests in school, might actually be more likely to be independent thinkers later on in life.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, being good at school actually helps you think differently later on.
Well, it's more like being less exposed to conventional beliefs early on.
Okay. Yeah.
Like almost having a blank canvas. That might actually foster a more independent way of thinking later in life.
So you're saying if you weren't a nerd growing up, you're doomed to be conventionally minded?
No, not at all. There are other ways to nurture independent-mindedness.
Okay, like what? Spill the beans.
One of the suggestions from the article is to surround yourself with other independent thinkers.
Okay, so like, find your people.
Exactly. Think about being in a space where it's not just acceptable to challenge the status quo, but it's actually encouraged.
I could see how that would really open up your thinking.
If you're constantly around people who question assumptions, you're probably going to start doing that yourself, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. But even if you are surrounded by independent thinkers, are there times when maybe you should just go with the flow?
Oh, for sure. And the article mentions some challenges that successful startups face. That's a good example of this.
What do you mean?
So you start with this core group of fiercely independent minds, right?
The rebels who built the company.
Exactly. But as that company grows,
Uh-huh.
you need more structure and process. You have to hire people who like that stuff.
And what happens to that original rebel culture?
It can fade away.
Yeah.
It's like a natural progression.
Huh.
The more successful something becomes, the more it attracts people who are just more comfortable with stability and following the rules.
And that dilutes the original, like, rebellious spirit.
Sometimes, yeah. The article even pointed out how founders often feel more comfortable talking about their ideas with the founders of other companies.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, because those other founders, they've been through those same challenges.
Right, right.
They understand what it's like to take risks and challenge conventional thinking.
They get it.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's be real. Not everyone can just quit their job and join a startup just to improve their thinking skills, right?
Totally.
So what else can we do?
The article had some more like down-to-earth tips. One was to expand your social circle.
You're not talking about just adding more friends on Facebook, right?
Definitely not. Think about it more like seeking out people who think differently than you do.
Oh, that's a good idea.
People who are going to challenge your perspective and introduce you to new ideas.
But how do you actually do that? It's not like there's a club for people who think differently.
It's true. It's more about just being open to diverse perspectives in your everyday life.
Okay, I can try that.
Yeah, just strike up conversations with people from different backgrounds, professions, or even generations.
I like that.
Everyone has a unique story, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
everyone sees the world differently. It's about being curious about other people.
Yeah, and not trying to like shove everyone in the same box or whatever.
Right. And the article mentioned another thing I found really interesting.
Okay, what is it?
Reading history.
History. I gotta admit, history was never my favorite subject. Too many dates to remember.
Oh, I know what you mean. It's not about memorizing facts, though.
Okay, but how does reading history help you think for yourself?
Because it helps you understand how people in the past thought and reasoned.
So we're talking about mindsets.
Yeah, it's like looking through a window into different mindsets and worldviews.
Wow, that's a really cool way to think about it. It's like all these alternative ways of thinking about problems. right?
Exactly, and the more you're exposed to these different ways of thinking, the more flexible your own OWN thinking becomes.
So it's not even just about coming up with new ideas. It's about being able to look at all ideas with a critical eye, even your own ideas.
You got it. And that brings us to the next key point from the article.
All right, hit me.
Techniques for examining your own beliefs.
Okay.
This is where it gets fun.
Examining my beliefs.
Oh,
That sounds like new work.
Ooh, I know, right? But the article frames it as a puzzle. Think about it this way. Some of the things you believe now will turn out to be wrong,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
but can you figure out which ones are wrong ahead of time?
So it's like a game of intellectual hide and seek.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a healthy sense of skepticism. Don't just believe everything you hear.
That's good advice for sure.
Question your assumptions. Like, why do you believe the things you believe? Evaluate the information you're given.
Okay, so not just automatically disagreeing to be contrary, but actually having a reason.
Right. It's not about finding flaws just to poke holes in things.
Great.
It's about being able to see the truly new and interesting ideas that might be hidden behind those flawed beliefs.
Like clearing out the clutter to make room for something really incredible.
That's a great way to put it.
And that leads right into the last point the article made about this, which is being aware of intellectual fashions.
Oh, yeah.
What does that even mean?
Think of it like trends, but for ideas.
Okay.
Like certain ideas, they become popular and they spread really quickly.
Like going viral or something.
Yeah, exactly. But just like with fashion, following the crowd can lead to a lot of boring conformity.
So we should be wary of ideas that everyone seems to be talking about.
Well, it's not about rejecting popular ideas completely.
Right.
It's more about being aware of their influence.
Gotcha.
Ask yourself, do I really believe this?
Right.
Or am I just going along with everyone else?
It's easy to just get swept up in what everyone else is thinking.
It is. And sometimes the most interesting and groundbreaking ideas, they're the ones that are not in fashion.
So venture off the beaten path a little.
Exactly. That's where you're most likely to find something truly original.
This is blowing my mind. And we're just getting started.
I know, right? This is good stuff.
The article goes even deeper, breaking down independent-mindedness into 3 core components.
We'll get into those next time.
Fastidiousness about truth,
That's a mouthful.
resistance to being told what to think,
Sounds rebellious.
and curiosity.
the most important one, in my opinion.
Oh, we've got to dive into that.
We'll unpack all of that, and we'll be looking at how these components can actually compensate for each other.
This is getting good. We'll pick it up right here next time.
All right, so are you ready to unpack these three components of independent-mindedness?
Absolutely. You've got me all intrigued. Let's start with that first one. Fastidiousness about truth.
Okay, so that one sounds pretty intense, right?
It does. It's kind of a mouthful.
It is, in a way, and it's not simply about believing or disbelieving things.
Okay.
It's more about how carefully you consider the degree to which you believe something.
So not just black and white thinking, more like shades of gray.
You got it. Independent thinkers, they're comfortable holding multiple possibilities in their minds at the same time.
Right.
They're not rushing to judge.
Interesting. So they're like, okay, maybe this is true, maybe it's not. Let me gather more information.
Precisely. And this actually ties into why independent thinkers are often averse to ideologies.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, think about it. Ideologies often require you to just accept a whole set of beliefs without question.
Right. No questions asked. Just believe it.
And to an independent thinker, that's just not appealing at all.
Yeah, they want to think for themselves.
Exactly. It's like someone's handing you a pre-packaged box of beliefs and saying, just swallow all of this, no need to examine the ingredients.
Yeah, like a mystery meat sandwich.
Yeah.
No thanks.
Exactly. They want to examine each idea individually,
Right.
see it from different angles, and then decide for themselves.
How much weight to give it.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, so that's fastidiousness about truth. What about resistance to being told what to think?
Oh, okay. So
Isn't that just being stubborn?
well, it can look that way, yeah.
Right.
But it's more nuanced than that. It's not about blindly rejecting everything you're told,
Right.
but it's about actively seeking out ideas that challenge what everyone else thinks.
So not just saying no to everything, but being open to different perspectives.
Oh,
Even if they're not popular.
exactly. And you know what this reminds me of? Our earlier conversation about humor.
Oh, really? How so?
Think about how often you laugh when you hear a truly novel idea for the first time. It's surprising. It disrupts our expectations, and that can be funny.
Like, wait, what? That's so crazy. It just might work.
Right, and that's what independent thinkers are drawn to, that feeling of surprise. That moment when you realize you might be wrong about something.
So you're saying both humor and independent thinking are fueled by this love of the unexpected.
Absolutely. They both challenge the status quo. They push the boundaries of what's considered normal or acceptable. And that can be a really good thing.
Intellectually and creatively.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered fastidiousness about truth and resistance to being told what to think.
What about the third one? Curiosity.
Ah, curiosity. This might be the most important component of all.
Really? Why is that?
Because it's the engine that drives the whole thing.
So without curiosity, you're not going to bother seeking out new ideas in the first place.
Exactly. Curiosity is what sparks the fire. It's what makes us ask questions, explore new things, and challenge what we think we know. And, the article makes this really interesting point about children.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Think about it. Kids, they're naturally curious, right?
Totally.
They're always experimenting, pushing boundaries, figuring out how the world works. It's like that saying, kids are natural scientists.
Yeah, I've heard that one before.
But somewhere along the way, a lot of people, they lose that drive to explore.
Life gets in the way.
It does, yeah. We get so focused on fitting in and following the rules.
Yeah.
And that can stifle our natural curiosity.
So the independent thinkers are the ones who hang on to that childlike sense of wonder.
I think so. They never lose that thirst for knowledge, that excitement about discovering something new.
Okay, so they're like lifelong learners.
Exactly. And they're not satisfied with the easy answers. They want to dig deeper. They want to understand the why behind the what.
I like that. So we've got these three components. Fastidiousness about truth, resistance to being told what to think, and curiosity.
Yeah.
But how do they all fit together?
It's like a symphony.
Okay.
Fastidiousness about truth and resistance to being told what to think, those create space in your mind for new ideas.
They clear out the clutter.
Exactly. They get rid of all the dogma and unexamined beliefs.
So they're like the gardeners who prepare the soil for something new to grow.
Perfect analogy. And then curiosity comes along and plants the seeds.
Okay, I'll follow you.
It's the driving force that keeps you going. The thing that pushes you to explore and challenge yourself.
Love it. But you said these components can actually compensate for each other, right?
Yes, that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. It's not like you have to be super strong in all three to be an independent thinker. You can have strengths in one area that make up for weaknesses in another.
Okay, so like maybe I'm really curious,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a hard time resisting what other people tell me to think.
Okay.
But my curiosity might be strong enough to overcome that.
That's right. You're so driven to learn, you naturally push past those boundaries, even if you're not trying to.
Right, it's like that curiosity just blasts right through any resistance.
Exactly. Or maybe you're incredibly careful about what you believe. You examine everything before you accept it as true.
So you're naturally filtering out a lot of the noise of conventional thinking.
Precisely. And that creates the perfect environment for curiosity to flourish.
It's like having a built-in BS detector.
Exactly.
This is making me rethink how I learn things.
That's awesome.
Instead of just absorbing information, I need to question it more, look at it from different angles.
That's the key. It's not just about what you know, it's about how you think about what you know.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about how important curiosity is.
Yeah.
But can you actually do anything to get more curious? Like, is that even possible?
That's a great question. And the article has some really good suggestions.
All right, let's hear them.
Okay, well, first you got to think about what you're currently doing. Your work, your hobbies, whatever.
Okay.
How much do those things actually engage your natural curiosity?
That's a good point. If I'm bored with what I'm doing, it's probably not making me more curious.
Exactly. So if that's the case, maybe it's time for a change.
Find something that actually excites you.
Right. Something that makes you want to learn more.
So follow your passions.
Yeah.
Sounds kind of cliche, but maybe it works.
There's definitely a connection there. When you're passionate about something, your curiosity just naturally follows. It's like there's this endless supply of questions and ideas
Okay.
just waiting for you to explore them.
But what about the things I'm not passionate about? Can I still learn to be curious about those?
Of course. You just got to find the entry point, the thing that sparks your interest. Maybe it's a book or a documentary or a conversation with someone who knows a lot about that topic.
So I have to be proactive. Go looking for those sparks.
Exactly. And the more you do that, the stronger your curiosity gets.
Wait a minute. Are you saying curiosity is like a muscle?
Yeah. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's one of the few appetites that actually increases the more you feed it. Every question you answer leads to even more questions.
That's a great way to think about it. It's like I'm finally understanding what it means to be a lifelong learner.
That's the beauty of it. Curiosity keeps you engaged, open to new experiences, and constantly evolving.
That's awesome. This has been so insightful.
It really has. We've covered so much ground already. The importance of independent thinking, the components that make it up, and even some practical tips.
And next time we'll be looking at
Some interesting points about how independent thinking can be different for different people,
right.
and how certain environments can affect it, like high school or even successful startups.
Oh, this is getting good. Can't wait to dive into that. So we've talked about what independent thinking is and like the key ingredients for it. But is there ever a downside to thinking differently?
That's a good question, and one the article doesn't really explore.
Right. It seems like all the benefits of independent thinking were laid out.
Yeah.
But aren't there times when it's better to not rock the boat?
Oh, absolutely. Like take a highly structured environment, for example,
Okay.
where it's super important to follow established procedures,
Okay, so like what are we talking about?
like an operating room
Okay, yeah.
or an air traffic control tower.
Right, high-stakes situations.
Exactly. You don't want people questioning every little thing.
Or trying to reinvent the wheel when lives are on the line.
Right. If you're constantly second-guessing protocols in those situations, it could have some pretty bad consequences.
So there are times and places for challenging the status quo.
For sure.
But other times, it's best to just follow the rules.
Yeah, it can be, and this actually ties into some of the challenges to independent thinking that the article did mention.
Like what?
High school.
Oh, yeah, high school.
It can be a really tough environment for independent-minded people.
Because there's so much pressure to fit in.
Exactly. The social dynamics in high school often reward conformity.
Right.
Like you're supposed to blend in, not stand out.
And that could be a real struggle for someone who naturally questions things or who sees the world a little differently.
Absolutely. They might feel like they just don't belong.
Or that their ideas aren't valued.
Which can be really discouraging, especially at that age.
Yeah, when you're still trying to figure out who you are and what you believe in.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for those independent thinkers to connect with other people who think like they do.
So find their tribe, their people.
Right. It's not just about being independent in your thinking. It's also about finding a community that supports that independence.
That makes sense. And the article mentioned that universities can be a good place for that.
Yeah, universities or other intellectual hubs where independent thought is valued and encouraged.
Because in those settings, it's not seen as weird or rebellious to question things. It's actually expected.
Right. It's part of the culture there, and that can be so liberating for someone who's used to feeling like an outsider.
Like finally a place where I can be myself
Right,
and where
totally.
people will actually listen to my ideas.
Exactly. A place where your ideas will be welcomed, not rejected.
But even in places that seem to embrace independent thinking, like you said, successful startups,
Yeah.
there can be challenges as they grow, right?
Right, because as a startup grows and becomes more successful, it often starts to attract a different kind of person.
What do you mean?
People who are more drawn to stability and structure, like the kind of structure you find in a larger organization.
And that can change the company culture.
It can, yeah. Sometimes it becomes less welcoming to the independent-minded folks who were there at the very beginning.
People who took the risks and built the company in the first place.
Exactly. It's almost like an inevitable law of nature. The more successful something becomes, the more it attracts people who just want to be part of that success.
Even if they don't really share the same values,
Right. And that can lead to some tension, especially for the founders.
who are probably those original independent thinkers,
Exactly. They might start to feel like their voices aren't being heard anymore.
like they're being pushed out of their own company.
In a way, yeah. And that's why the article said that founders often connect more with founders of other companies.
Because they understand what it's like to be in that position.
Right. They've faced similar challenges. They speak the same language.
So it's not just about finding environments that support independent thinking. It's about being aware of how those environments can change.
Exactly. And being prepared to adapt to those changes.
So independent thinking is a journey, not a destination.
I like that that's a great way to put it. It's an ongoing process of questioning and exploring and challenging yourself.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on what it means to think for myself.
I'm glad to hear that we covered so much today, the different components of independent thinking and how to cultivate curiosity and even where to find your tribe.
What's the biggest takeaway for you?
For me, it's that independent thinking is not something you're born with. It's a skill you can develop over time.
Like a muscle you can train.
Exactly. And it's not just a valuable skill for certain careers, it's a valuable skill for life.
I agree. I feel so much more confident now about embracing my own way of thinking, even if it means going against the grain sometimes.
That's great. And even if you don't see yourself as a rebel, there are still ways to be more independent in your thinking.
Like just being more curious.
Yeah, and questioning assumptions and being open to new ideas.
So the next time I find myself agreeing with everyone else just to go along with the crowd, I'm going to stop and ask myself, do I really believe this? Or am I just following the herd?
That's a great strategy. And remember, independent thinking can be challenging, so be patient with yourself.
It's a process.
It is so, just embrace the journey. Stay curious and never stop questioning.
This has been fantastic. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into independent thinking.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time for another exploration of ideas that matter.